So all right, so we in the groove.
Shit. My new book should be here and it's not. I'm gonna have to run upstairs and get it.
All right, y'all. What's up, y'all? Splendid Radio on Pharcyde TV with co-host Jeremy Scipio and tonight's guest, Brian B Plus Cross. What's up, sir?
What's going on, brother? You good?
Yeah, man. It's a trip. I'll tell you something funny about B Plus. Like back in the day, the golden era hip hop community in LA was kind of like really small, and I was kind of blessed to be a part of. I wasn't part of. I won't say a part of the elitist, but I was there to watch a lot of stuff happen. And B Plus was this cat that would always he just always showed up with a camera, and it's a trip because I never knew, like, you were a photographer, but it didn't click like that. Like, it just, you were the guy around with a camera. You know what I'm saying? But he was around Freestyle Fellowship. He was around the Pharcyde, Delicious Vinyl, all that little area. He was around Unity, Bigger B, rest in peace, Jeremy. Unity was a club where Bigger B, the guy who was co-founder, he was was he an A&R at Loud? He worked for Loud Records doing something, but he ended up like road managing the Wu-Tang Clan and stuff like that. So he was the first dude who brought the Wu-Tang out to he's the first person that brought the Wu-Tang out to LA. And I remember seeing him, it was at a bowling alley, and it was all 9 of them, and they were rapping on stools with mics in front of them. And it was the most incredible thing. Oh man, they still doing fireworks over here. I live semi-hood, you understand me? They ain't burnt them out yet. But yeah, but it was crazy because you see, it was Wu-Tang, but it wasn't exactly that Wu-Tang that was the Killer Bees or whatever. Not taking anything away from it, but these cats were almost it was almost like watching poetry, man. Like literally not jocking them or nothing like that, but they didn't cross over each other. And that was the most amazing thing to me, how you had 9 guys on a mic and no one was talking over each other. No one was, you know? Yeah.
I remember Bill telling me, because Bill was their road manager.
That's what it was. I knew he did something for Loud. He did something for Loud, and he ended up road managing.
He did stuff for Loud, and that was one of them, basically. You know, he did a bunch of different stuff or whatever. And I remember him, you know, he was like, "Yo, man, trying to get lunch on the road, man, that could take up to 3-4 hours," because he was like, "These ones always want to go to this spot. These ones want to go to this one. These ones go to this one. These, you know." And I was just like, man, you know, if you talk about any kind of job, anywhere, anytime, you said you were road manager to Wu-Tang, that's kind of like, you could deal with any eventuality. Yeah. Bill is a special dude, man. I mean, he really, I mean, the vision was really it was something else, you know, in the sense that, like, you remember, I mean, there wasn't really too many places you could see hip hop live in those days. You know, there was no circuit, or, you know what I mean? Like, it was, you know, LA was like, and then at the same time, the industry was burgeoning. So they would send people to LA all the time to do press or to do TV or whatever. But they would rarely do gigs unless it was somewhere, you know, Century Club kind of jiggy spot. You know what I mean? And then Bill was like, nah, Bill was on some for the people. And then the other thing that was amazing was that he would always put local acts opening up. So, you know, like if you're, you know, you're a Raz Kaz, or you're a Pharcyde or a Fellowship or whatever, you have a chance to light up a stage before a Wu-Tang or before a, you know what I mean, whoever had a national profile and was out here, you know. And and then it'd be like, you know, like $5 to $10. And you know, and it could be anywhere from I mean, I've seen shows in parking lots, I've seen shows in bowling alleys, I've seen shows in
Yep.
rooftops. Do you know what I mean? It was like
Any venue was a venue. He would take anything and turn it into a venue.
for sure. For sure. The musicians union a few times.
Yeah.
But and then as it went along, then he started booking bigger venues. You know, he started having you know, they started to notice. But it was different in those days in the sense that the kind of Golden Voice Rock Nation thing wasn't.
They were no part, and that's what I was about to say. It's a trip because I've known the Pharcyde, and I kind of was around during the making of Bizarre Ride, and like there in that time and space, you were around like at that time and space. It's like we get jaded, you know what I'm saying? And people do a lot of interviews and they talk about like all the great parts, but they don't like put it this way, Jeremy, there was no corporate interest at this point. So it was like really you were like the groups were doing it, not trying to get paid. They just wanted to get on a stage in LA. Like as far as the groups, like Black Moon with Buckshot and them, you know, just like Unity would have anybody, like literally anybody. I've seen ODB a couple of times, the Alcoholics, you know, they're home.
One of the first things he did, I actually collaborated with him because I was writing for Herb magazine at that time, and sometimes you would get, you know, through the publicist or whatever, you'd get the heads up, you get a tape early or whatever, and Bill was always like, he was always trying to, you know, find out what was about to crack next or whatever. And
not to cut you off, B plus. Yeah. But let them know what Herb was. There's some people they probably don't.
So Herb, URB was a free magazine. I mean, they charged for it later, but it was a free magazine that you could find in record stores and kind of fashion stores or whatever, street apparel stores. That started in, I want to say it was 1990. Yeah, I think the first issue was in 1990. I think I had photos in the second or third issue. I did a story about the Watts Prophets, believe it or not. And but basically the thing about it is like, you know, as with a lot of things in those days, there was no internet. So it was difficult to find out actually, you know, if you came to LA and you were trying to find out what was up or where to go or whatever, it was either the LA Weekly, which really wasn't trying to pay attention to what was happening with, you know, anything south of Wilshire, they don't know about it. But it was really an attempt to, you know, the sort of burgeoning rave culture on one side and the early underground hip hop culture on the other side. And they would, yeah. So it was me and G Money, man. Me and G Money used to write about, and Jeff Chang used to write about hip hop for Herb back in those days. And there was this group. We heard it was a big, you know, big to do about him. And Bill said, man, let's try and do something with him. So me and Bill did it together, actually. And I think it was one of his first gigs, which was Onyx.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And we did a show with Onyx at some little club off of Fairfax, like around 6th. I don't remember the name of the place now. But yeah, it was one of those first ones where like it was like they were going to be out here for a week doing press. And obviously they were Jam Master Jay's group, which was the kind of buzz that like, oh, it's, you know, they related to Run DMC. And yeah, we booked them for a show. I remember it was absolutely packed. And I remember being like, wow, what a success this is. And at the end, me and him sitting down and being like, damn, we barely pay enough money for to go get a tuna melt at Larry Parker's.
Oh, man.
But it was, you know, it was a special time, really. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, it was, you know, some weeks he was lucky, some months he was lucky, some months he wasn't lucky. But the point was, there was nothing else. If he wasn't doing it, it wasn't happening. So, yeah.
So I hear the accent. Tell the people that don't know, where are you from and how did you end up in LA?
Yeah, I'm Irish. Back in the first time I came to the States was in May of 1988. And I lived in San Francisco in the Mission District for more or less 6 months on a student visa, worked moving furniture, spent most of my money buying records. I was listening to hip hop before I came. And it was super important. There was a bunch of us I was already at college at that point, and there was a bunch of us at the school that were listening to it. And came to San Francisco, and at the end of my street, I was really lucky. There was it's still there as far as I remember, but there is a store called Community Thrift, and it was like a thrift. I think it was the first thrift store to be set up where the money was going towards research into AIDS.
Okay.
But it literally, the store at the end of my block, the store opened, and you could buy 12 inches for, I think it was 10 cents, man. And that's where I've copped like the first biz, like a bunch of stuff that, at that time I thought was a big deal. You know what I mean? The first Roy Ayers 12-inch I ever copped. I mean, a bunch of stuff. And but I had been listening to hip hop prior, and then I had the chance to go to grad school here at Cal Arts. So I came back and went to Cal Arts. And then it was while I was at Cal Arts then that somebody said, like, how come, you're looking for something to shoot when you're here? I was already making photos, but I was more like a landscape photographer. And one of my professors was like, I was talking about hip hop. How come you don't make some photos? The way you just be like, okay. And then I was, in my mind, I'm like, man, this definitely has to be somebody doing this already. And as it turned out, not really, actually. Not, you know what I mean? Like, there was cats that were music photographers that had photographed NWA or Ice-T or whoever the folks were out here. But as far as somebody actually paying attention to what was going on at a kind of, sub-industry level or whatever, there was nobody. Anybody even thinking about it seriously as a cultural movement or anything like that, there wasn't really anybody doing it. And I think the reason people remember me so much from those periods, because there wasn't anybody else taking photos, actually. It was very few people with cameras out there photographing hip hop. It wasn't, I don't know, for a lot of people, it wasn't really considered a worthy subject, I guess. I mean, that's how I say it.
The two people that I remember that always had a camera or some form of, well, first of all, there were some people around that took pictures, but it was more of documenting the time. I'll say you were one of the first photographers that I saw who took pictures, and like you were creating art from the art in a sense, capturing it, and not jogging, but just saying, because it was you and Ava DuVernay. Like, okay, so Ava was around. She always had a video camera in her hand, and she was kind of like, she was just the girl that was around that was just documenting everything. And then you were the guy that had the camera. But it was a trip because, like, I remember you, like, I probably didn't see you as a photographer until probably like 92, 93-ish. But I just, like, you were just the cool dude that was around, and you didn't speak much because I didn't catch on to your accent until like a while later, because we were around the same circles and everything.
Yeah, for sure.
You really didn't communicate so much. But you had the camera. So you had the camera, she had the camera. And then I want to say, once you got with Herb, and then it was not that you dealt with them, but with the Sheena Lesters and the Rat Pay and like all that crowd of people, those people going around. And then I want to say something came up, and I remember there being and they were like, B+ needs to shoot the something or another, or he's going to shoot the something or another. Then I was like, oh man, he's not just the guy that's around with the camera, but to tell you, similar, Mona Lisa. I remember Mona Lisa so vividly when she just worked at Loud, that when she started DJing, it took me a while to see her as a DJ. Not like, it was amazing to me, because it's like, okay, this is Mona Lisa, she's from Loud, you know her since the 90s or whatever, and you see her name on a flyer and she's DJing, and then I'm showing up at the Echoplex, and I'm seeing her do the Prince and the Michael Jackson parties, and she's like the opening DJ, and she's killing it. And I'm like, dang, homegirl, and it's amazing because you saw this person when they didn't like you knew the person before they even spun records. And so back to something that Brown says a lot, we're jaded, man. We were around so much magic going on that it's difficult to look at stuff in the context that people see it now.
Sure. For sure. I remember Mona Lisa organizing the listening party for the first Diamond D record, and it was at Roscoe's on Pico.
Wow.
Like, we all hung out at Roscoe's and listened to Diamond D's first record, and it was cool. You know, they kind of blocked off a certain area of Roscoe's, and everybody who was invited went there. And yeah, I mean, I talked to her about this. Yeah, Mona's great, man. I mean, it's nice, you know, I mean, the thing that's nice is, you know, Mona, folks like this, Bree, even, you know, is to see folks,
yeah,
you know, from back then that are doing good and they're still in the game and they're still, you know what I mean? It's dope. Super dope.
So what was junior high school like for you?
See, in Ireland, we don't have junior high school. We have primary and we have secondary. So junior high is like what age? Like 12 to
13, like 12 to like 15.
So junior high, I would have been at the beginning of secondary school. It was good. Our team won the All Ireland Soccer Championship under 14. I scored a goal in the final. That was pretty cool.
Oh, wow.
I wasn't even thinking about photography. I was sports. I did a lot of sports. I was a big young fella, so every team, every possible sports. I had my family background was in sports, so I played Irish sports like hurling and football. I played soccer. I played mostly rugby, and I was listening to a lot of punk rock music.
Okay.
First smoked herb for the first time around that era, but it was cool. I mean, it was. Ireland was weird at that time. It was a dark moment in Irish history, really, in retrospect. I mean, it didn't feel that dark for us at the time, but it was.
And y'all know how to turn up. we taking little lessons. We taking little lessons with how we want to protest or do it however we want to do it. But my first time to Ireland, it was when they had I want to say the mad cow disease was going on, and it had to be like around 96-ish or so. And we drove in off the ferry, and I remember it was funny because they made you drive your car through this detergent that was supposed to like cleanse the tires, and then you had to step out of the car into like this little bleach solution for your shoes, and then you got back on and you drove in. But it was crazy because they only did the solution on one side of the car for the tires. So I always thought that was funny. But crazier than that, we were in Ireland and we were moving from one place to another, and it ended up the second show, I believe, was on a Saturday. And so we were driving, and I see these people at like 10 o'clock in the morning with soccer jerseys on, faded, just rowdy. I mean, with girls too. It wasn't just like some rowdy guys, just, soccer fans or whatever. They had the girls, it looked like the street, you know what I'm saying? It was about like 6-7 of them walking. I was like, I don't know what Ireland is, but I know they're pretty hardcore.
Oh yeah,
Irish.
Oof. Yeah, that era, like, yeah, you could definitely see all kinds of, I don't know. I mean, it's weird because for me, it's you normalize it. It's like, oh, that's supposed to be what it's like on a Saturday night. Just people like half the population is falling around the place, fighting each other, throwing up on each other, or trying to whatever. You know what I mean? But well, just people treat alcohol differently. You know what I mean? There's people has a different relationship to alcohol. I mean, in Ireland, like, anything is an excuse for a drink. Anything.
But it's stronger also. The beer in the States, they pull that alcohol back a little bit.
I don't even think the beer in the States is beer, dude. honestly. I'm just be honest. I mean, you know, what I mean, all the mainstream brands. What is that stuff? The real test is: look, can you drink a Budweiser warm? You can drink a Miller warm. You drink any of them beers warm. Tastes like garbage. You can drink a Guinness warm. Drink a Guinness.
Okay.
Guinness is good for you. It's real. There's no additives. That's a fucking beer, you know. Ask like a Jamaican. What do the Jamaicans drink? What do West Africans drink? Fucking Guinness.
Oh,
Good for you. I have a lot of vitamins and irons in it and stuff. But then obviously vitamins and irons isn't what's important after you drink 20 pints. You know what I mean? Like,
what is this? We say vitamins. There's vitamins in beer.
Yeah, vitamins and irons in it. Yeah, it's very good. I mean, Guinness is very good for you. I mean, it's shocking if you drink what we would call a feed of Guinness. Like a feed of Guinness would be like 8 pints. If you drank 8 pints of Guinness and you're not used to it, I remember the first time I went there with Madlib and J-Rock. We had a feed of Guinness. They were, oh, it's fucking beautiful. Oh, it fucking tastes amazing. Next minute, the following morning, they're all like, Jesus, I don't think I drink any Guinness tonight. We come back out of you with, I mean, it's a pretty intense shock to the system, you know. It's a lot of hops, barley, you know, a lot of iron really is the thing. That's what Jamaicans like about it. But you know, at least it's something real. I mean, unfortunately, I don't know. Here I drink, you know, I drink, you know, Korean beer, Japanese beer, Mexican beer. I don't really drink mainstream American beer really. It's people. I mean, people. Yeah, I'm not even gonna start talking shit.
I drink on the beer side of the game. I'll drink a Budweiser and I'll even drink it warm if it's with a family member. It's kind of like how if you smoke, you'll hit some stress. You know, man. You know.
Weed is weed. I completely agree. Weed is weed, and if it's the only thing there, and you want to have a drink,
I wouldn't buy Budweiser though. It's crazy. I didn't start drinking into my 30s, and then I've developed over the last probably like 4 years a very good palate for beer, like craft beer, IPAs, pale Indian ales, and just all kind. Like, not to get faded, but more or less, I like beer that really tastes good.
Yeah.
So you're saying you have to be high in order to enjoy a warm beer, American beer?
Yeah, man. Off some Reggie too. Not the bomb. You gotta have the whole experience, man.
Yo, so would you say, I feel like I'm an artist myself. I went to art school, so I can kind of relate. They say like every artist has like a magnum opus, you know, like your best piece, or your or favorite piece really. What would you say like your favorite piece, your favorite person you took a picture of, a favorite moment or whatever?
I mean, it's difficult because obviously, I mean, there's a lot of different. I mean, obviously, for starters, I've done it for 30 years, so there's a lot of shit. I mean, a lot. And then there's all kinds of different reasons to like things. But I mean, given the present company and whatnot, in that era, the Pharcyde had a manor, which was Bundy, right? No, it's not Bundy. Budlong. It was off Budlong.
It was like not too. It was walking distance from USC. It wasn't too far from USC. In that area.
And it was a particularly kind of rowdy street. And as a result, I mean, it could go off. You know, it would on a good night. You could see, there'd be 30, 40 people there, mostly MCs, but a few, girlfriends, brothers and sisters, big boys, folks that are yourself. And I saw things there and had the honor to be able to photograph things there that I've never seen since, as far as just, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, the way I would describe it, it was like almost like like a freestyle big band, except as opposed to having horns and flutes, like, you know, like a big band, it was MCs, and everybody was coming with a different style. And sometimes people would, you know, in an open cypher where people are trying to jump in, sometimes you'll catch two cats at the same time, and they would continue and
Mm-hmm.
and be able to actually
Play off of each other.
play off of each other. And like I mean, there was just, you know, of course nobody had video cameras, but I took some photos. I mean, I did take some photos, and for that period, those photos really are. I'm very proud of those photos. Those photos ended up in Ava's first film, obviously.
Okay.
Welcome to the Life, or The Life. A lot of those photos ended up in the film, and I'll tell you another funny story. One of the great jazz photographers of all time, a kind of hero of mine, a guy by the name of Herman Leonard. If you get a chance to look him up, but he's the dude that did I don't know if it's kind of a famous, iconic image of Dexter Gordon with the smoke. I don't know if you've ever seen that. There's a great picture of Dexter Gordon with the hexaphonis with the smoke. And it was Herman Leonard did it. And he, you know, he's very famous photographs of Billie Holiday and Duke Ellington. And anyway, I had a show and he had a show many years later, like in the sort of mid 2000s. And he came and then we did a panel where they asked me as somebody from Music Now to interview him, or it was supposed to be a conversation, but it was really me asking him questions. He was already in his 80s. And so after the Q&A thing, he wanted to see my photos, and he came to see my show. We got to the photo of the Pharcyde on the front steps of the Pharcyde Manor, where they're all standing like with their hands like this. And he was like, I want that photo. And I was like, dude, whatever, I mean, come on. Yeah, you know? And he was like, I don't think you understand me. I want you to pick one of my photos and I'm going to swap you for that.
Whoa.
So I have a beautiful photograph of Billie Holiday signed by him.
Wow.
And he has this great photograph of the Pharcyde. He passed away now, sadly, but yeah, I was very happy. It made me feel like that moment and my kind of excitement about it wasn't lost on somebody who was a veteran from earlier moments like that, except in his moments it was Billie Holiday or John Coltrane or Duke Ellington, and in my moments it was, you know what I mean? You guys.
Yeah, I pulled up the picture you were talking about, the one with the smoke. Yeah, I see why you're drawn to this. Like, this is amazing. Like, I play a little jazz piano. I like to brag about it because it was definitely a lost art of mine. But like, yo, this is like everything.
Really, you know, I mean, there's a number of cats, I mean, that really understood what was at stake in making those images. I'm talking about him and people like even Gordon Parks or you know, Francis Wolff, the guy who did all the Blue Note photos, or I'm trying to think, Roy DeCarava, the photographer from Harlem. But all those cats really, you know, it's because of those images that we think of, you know, jazz has the kind of mystique that it does, you know. I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like, obviously, if you're into music, you understand. But the quality of the images that were made of those guys really, you know, translated it into a kind of, even if you don't know the music, you see pictures of Coltrane and you realize he's a heavy spiritual cat because of how, you know what I mean? How he was translated. So, and I don't think I was kind of on this, you know, that mission at first. It wasn't like I would never have compared myself to those cats. But in retrospect, of course, like, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to say that I'm one of the cats
of the time.
I was gonna say, give yourself credit, man.
Yeah, so
what drew you to
not too many of us that were doing it, but you know what I mean?
Are those the guys that drew you? Like, obviously they were inspirations, but is that what drew you into photography, or that's just you just developed?
No, actually, my interest in photography was more general, which was that I just liked the immediacy of it. Like, I had started as a painter, but then I was like, well, why the fuck would I be painting if I could be making photos? You know what I mean? I can move quicker. And I was just interested. I mean, I'm just interested in images and ideas, like how images play out as ideas, and how it allows you to speak about things without language, and it allows us to understand, like, sometimes, like, underlying structures. You know, why certain people are pictured, why other people aren't pictured. And so that was really the start. And because at first, you know, when I was living in Ireland, obviously there was no hip hop yet. I mean, there was music, but I wasn't really that interested in photographing the music. I was more interested in photographing the landscape. And for Ireland, you know, for Ireland, like, our relationship to the land is a very important one, and the way that the land is pictured for us is important. And so I was trying to talk about history and try to understand, like, if there's ways to photograph the land that's more, you know, to try to disengage the kind of the gaze, if you want, of the colonizer somehow, and find a way to make images of our landscape that had disengaged from the British perspective on Ireland, you know, which was a very pastoral one, but it was one that erased the indigenous population, you know. It's like, oh, what a country, so green, and look at those beautiful views. And it's like, where the fuck are the people?
The green. When I think of Ireland, I think of sometimes seeing the ocean, but seeing something very green and cheap. Like, that's what I think of. And then I think of yeah, no, they got sheep. They got a lot of sheep.
Oh, sheep. I thought you said cheap. I'm like,
oh,
what?
no. Nah, they got a pound. They have some version of the pound, so it's not too cheap. But you know a funny thing. We actually were in Ireland on St. Patty's Day one time, and it was Brown, Imani, myself, and a couple of band members, and we had walked out in front of the club, and, you know, people were drinking, but, and we're like, man, you know, does it get doper than this? We're in Ireland on St. Patrick's Day, and it was a girlfriend and a boyfriend, and they were walking. And, well, you know what? I don't know if they were girlfriend and boyfriend. It was a male and a female that looked like they knew each other. They were walking with their arms around each other. So you know how you have these little things that you lock your bikes to. It's like it looks like an upside down U, kind of like a steel upside down U. So the guy and the girl are walking, and their legs tangle, and the girl falls, and she hits her head on the like the little U thing. Dude, we saw the knot grow on her head. Like, dude, it was amazing. That day I learned how incredible the human body was. She wasn't injured so much she had to go to the hospital, but I say she had a knot. We saw something that was nothing, and it just went from ouch to when she took her hand off. And I was like, man, y'all party, man. You know?
I mean, I've seen things from people under the influence of alcohol that,
yeah, man. You guys took it to another level, man. So tell me this, B Plus. So your first time to the States was San Francisco. Then you come back. You're living in LA.
Mm-hmm.
When hip hop hit you, I'm absolutely positive, and I'll say this: it probably wasn't West Coast hip hop that hit you first. It was you know, it was probably some East Coast hip hop. How did it impact you, and what was the first hip hop that you felt that you connected with?
So basically, the first hip hop I heard was, I was living in Ireland, and, you know, I mean, it has to be Sugar Hill. I remember Sugar Hill. Mm-hmm. But it was like, I don't know, it was like anything else, you know, it was like just another song, you know, there was all kinds of, I don't want to say novelty, you know what I mean? But I didn't even think of it as a genre or anything yet. It was just like, oh, that was a huge hit. You know, everybody knew it. I was quite young, you know, like 79, I would have been like 13 or something like that. It didn't really register to me so before even the music registered, you started to see kids trying to break dance in Ireland. there was kids that was rocking like trying to break dance. You know what I mean? Like that's something on TV, and they were trying to do it. I mean, dance is interesting because I'm working on a Jamaican project right now, trying to understand like just how crazy the Jamaican dance thing is right now, just how many moves there is, and the relationship to like the new Afro beats out of West Africa and shit. And the dance thing is like, I mean, they know about viral since before the internet. You know what I mean? There's you know what I mean? Like for dancers, there's, you know, I guess for DJs too, there's those like treasured VHSs or DVDs that they have, and it become their blueprint of how to figure it out. So ever before we were really aware of the culture or the graffiti or anything, it was the dance. And then I would say really the sort of, I mean, White Lines was a huge song also. I had no idea what it was about. One of the older young fellas was like, you know, it's about coke, right? I was like, I don't even know what that is. But, and then I remember when I really start to think about it, to be honest, a weird one, but I don't know if you remember this song, but there was a song called Malcolm X, No Sellout on Tommy Boy. And it was like one of those DJ records that was kind of like an edit. So it was like beats with parts of Malcolm X speeches over it. And that really hit me because A, I didn't know who Malcolm X was, and B, the way he was talking, I mean, the voice, the what he was actually saying really struck me hard. Around the same time, I would have found Revolution Will Not Be Televised by Gil Scott-Heron. Like you would hear that on the radio in Ireland for some reason. And that's where it all started to kind of, you know, it's in the message almost, I think, nearly before the style of music. I mean, don't get me wrong. The first Mantronics record, for example, was a huge record. That was huge. Like I didn't know how that was, like how good that sounded, like really messed my head up. But like I think the message start to get through even before that, like Malcolm, you know what I mean? Like White.
So what did you think, being from the Ireland's not considered the Ireland is, yep, I'm about to start some stuff. It is yeah. So, you know, I won't claim to have passed any geography classes and whatnot, but what would be the correct term for, it's just Ireland. It's just
Republic of Ireland. Yes.
Republic of Ireland. Okay. All right. Yeah, we're gonna keep it like that. And so Malcolm McLaren, how did you feel about his interpretation of hip hop and how he was connecting with like the Supreme team?
Yeah, I mean,
those guys.
You know, he'd always been a controversial figure for us, obviously, because if you were into punk rock, which punk rock was huge for us. Like I was 12 years old. I remember the first time I ever seen anything on TV about punk rock. And within 5 minutes, you're gonna laugh at this, man, but it's not junior high. It's a little bit younger. I was like 11. There was two things on TV that were like had the biggest cultural impact of that time, and one was seeing punk rock for the first time, you know, seeing people wearing crazy haircuts and piercings with safety pins, and
I had one,
torn clothes, and you know what I'm saying, all that kind of stuff. Just not only that, but like the attitude and the way they talked and shit was like, whoa, there's nothing, you know what I mean? Like everything on TV looked real official and straight, you know what I mean? And then here come these cats, and it's just like, whoa. And then the other thing, which is, it's kind of too crazy, but like for Irish people, it really resonated, man. And I have a friend, anyways, the other thing that was huge was Roots, which was at the same time. So in our school, there was one gang that was called the Paddy Punk Rockers, and there was another gang called the Chicken Georges. And it wasn't like, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't like we really had an understanding. The Chicken Georges, because that was what they were trying to get. Kunta Kinte, that was the name they were trying to get from Roots. Yeah. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
You know, the thing about roots, I mean, I'd love to, I mean, it'd be very interesting to see like a study of how roots was perceived
around the
outside of
world.
yeah, because here, I think it's, I mean, it was clearly super, most importantly for people to have it here, just the notion of it, like, you know what I mean? Like, we're not like some, you know, community of people set adrift with no, you know, no past, and you know what I mean? Like,
magically appeared.
yeah, I mean, that's important. I mean, that's important. I mean, you know, when Garvey was saying that stuff back in the day, like, you know, that was radical. You know what I mean? They didn't, the last thing they wanted was people thinking about that stuff. But anyways, for Irish people, actually, we have similar problems in the sense of it's very difficult to trace back because there's such a diaspora for us, because the famine, the island no longer was able to sustain its population. So we just sent people off into the world. And so there's paddies everywhere. Do you know what I mean? There's Irish peoples everywhere. It doesn't matter where you go, there's paddies for sure.
I'll tell you, oh, I'm sorry, but real quick, I'll tell you an interesting conversation I had.
Okay.
I was talking to someone from Ireland, and I was talking Jamaican beef patty, and they were talking meat pie, an Irish meat pie. Yep. and they were trying to tell me that there's some type of way that the Jamaican is kind of like an offshoot somewhat of the meat pies that they make like in Ireland. And
bro, the Jamaican way of speaking, there's so many words in patois that are like, they're not even related to English words, they're related to Irish words, like Gaelic, our language. You know, if you hear Jamaican say, just one example, I always talk to Damian Marley about this, but easy example, you'll hear Jamaicans say Gansey. And what they mean is your sweater, basically. Well, that's an Irish word for sweater. Gansey is not English. It's a fucking Irish word. The reason is because, yeah, Irish people, there was an uprising at the end of the 17th century. And even before that, actually, I mean, there was Irish sent to the West Indies from the late 1500s. You know, Cromwell ran amok in our country and took a gang of prisoners. The main difference is that we were there as chattel slaves. Africans were there as slaves. And the difference was that you know, we were kind of considered like prisoners, and we were able to, like, if you had kids, they wouldn't necessarily be slaves. There was a system basically where, you know, I think we still have the residue of that system, but where people of African descent are getting the worst piece of the stick. But paddies we were doing a bit better, but we weren't doing a hell of a lot better. And as a result, in the fields, Africans learned the slave master's language from Irish people side by side in the fields, you know. So, and it might seem like a crazy long time ago or whatever, but there's retention, you know, there's things that are still there, you know, there's still words, there's still customs, there's still ways of thinking about things. So yeah, I have a friend who's an actor who was an extra on a Rihanna video, for example. And halfway through the video, she found out that there was an Irish fella from Ireland on the video, and she called him into her dressing room. And then he was in shock because she knew so much fucking Irish history. But where from, that's where there's a lot of paddies there. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, it's also interesting and kind of controversial at the present time because of this, man, the far right knows no levels as far as stupidity. And so they're saying, well, the Irish were slaves. You don't see them fucking complaining.
A little different.
No fucking comparison between what Irish people had to deal with. Obviously, yes. Was it fucking rough? Yes. Was it difficult? Yes. But was it the level that Africans were dealing with? Hell no. And a whole mess of difference. Irish people, in the end, fuck up. In the end, we done wrong. We were friends with Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass came to Ireland, actually, which is kind of, we were never taught that in school, but has come out over the past like 20 years or whatever through scholarship, or whatever, and spent 3 months in Ireland during the famine, you know, during one of the darkest periods of our history, and spoke out against the kind of Irish kind of aristocracy for doing fuck all to save people's lives. The Irish population went at the beginning of the 19th century. The Irish population was 9 million, and by the end of the 19th century, it was 1 million. So you can imagine it was no joke. But in the end, Irish Americans that were basically clawing their way up, in the end, fought against abolition. Actually, were against abolition, because it would have, their idea was that it would have made the workplace more difficult, and it would have, you know, they would have been earning less. They would have been in a worse situation competing against newly freed slaves, basically. And this is a sad, you know, in an otherwise a pretty interesting kind of acts of solidarity exist between the two communities. This is one of the darker moments, really, is in the middle of the 19th century. Yeah, the Irish vote changed its position.
So tell me this: what was your first photograph in hip hop where people were like, okay, this isn't B plus, the guy that's walking around with the camera everywhere, but like, dang, B plus, dang, we saw you, we saw that, man. You was using the magazine, man. What was your first photo to kind of break through? And who was it?
Okay, so there's a few that kind of all happened around the same time, but like the Freestyle Fellowship on the cover of Herb, I had done that, and that was the first time I think that, like, amongst the heads at the club, people were like, "Oh shit, I saw you." But then, like, the first album cover really that I got proper credit for, like, I did the photos for Inner City Griots, but the one that I really got the love for was I did the cover of 187 for Eazy-E. You know, the one where he's pouring out the 40.
Yeah.
Yeah, that photo, and then that was like
hard.
Not only was that like I got paid properly, and I was like, oh shit, like I could live on this. But it's just crazy to see your photo reproduced everywhere. You know, like I mean, Relativity was distributing them, but I mean, for me, that was a big deal. Those images were everywhere. You know, the promo posters and everything was everywhere, and it was like, whew, it was pretty fucking great. I was happy with that shit.
So not only have I slapped, and you know, we could talk for hours on that time and space of like 90 to like 94ish, 95ish, like the way you heard about parties. There was no social media. You might have got this little, like, Bill was notorious for these little Kinko style 1/4 of a page scribbled. The artwork wouldn't even be dope sometimes, but it was just
a lot of times.
Yep. Yeah, it's crazy because it was like phone calls on a Friday night. But you know what? We partied all through the week though at that time.
No, the kind of game changer for me was there was two of them, was the hip hop hotlines. And Gary G Money Steffens, we used to call him.
Yeah.
Stevens, and then Big Boy.
Big Boy, the party line.
Boy had the hip hop hotline, 1-800 something, you know what I mean? Whatever. And you could call there and he would have made a message, yo, tonight, Guadalinda's, it's Tuesday, you know what I mean? Hollywood's jumping off, we're gonna have Skate Master Tate, DJ Kelu, woo, whoever else was playing. And we, leaders of the new school is in town, you know they might show up. Don't sleep, you know, whatever. You'd be like, all right, that's where I gotta go.
That's so crazy, man, because I knew Big Boy, but I knew him as someone who worked for Paul Stewart, who helped him like DJ certain little stuff. And then also Big Boy was helping Paul hand out records too. Like, you know, it was like he was a go-to. And because the Pharcyde was managed by Paul at the time, so I would see like Big Boy and Ray coming by the house to pick up speakers and turntables to go and do something. It's crazy how you put that together though. But Dude, that time and space, man. That time and
I did
space.
his photos then. I mean, I have to say, man, like I mean, the first time I ever seen him doing anything on the radio, Danny Holloway had a radio show. I mean, there was so few hip hop, so little hip hop on the radio. You know, K-Day had died, so you know there was like you know, there was Mike Nardone, basically. There was Rob One at Northridge. And then Holloway started buying, it was like 2 hours on this religious radio station in San Gabriel Valley, 98.7, I remember was the thing. But you could, you know, you could buy like slots. And we started, you know, he just thought like it was a good idea. And I was like, all right, I'm in. And he was paying for it. So I was like, all right, well, I'll show up and play records. And but pretty soon, every week. And he wasn't doing the Baker Boys thing yet, but pretty soon Big Boys started showing up. And then I just remember, like, by the second time we seen him, we were like, dude, like, how the fuck is he doing this?
Natural.
You know, he had all the different voices.
Natural.
Speaking in, you know, fake Spanish, his like so much of that stuff was already there. Like it would just come out of him. And we'd just be cracking up. Like, this is the funniest shit ever, you know? And the funniest shit, of course, was that he had this cousin called Mark and Fuzzy, which is three very, very, very big dudes in a hoopty, but not a big car. Not like that kind of hoopty, but like a little, like a old school Ford, or like Honda Civic type of car. And the three of them would get in it, and we'd be just like, dude, that car is not gonna make it. Three big, really big dudes.
Big Boy and Fuzzy were big, man. They were big back in the day.
And they had I think Big Boy had a cousin called Mark. Maybe it was Fuzzy's cousin. And they used to all roll together, and it was just like, dude, like three big dudes. It was funny. Yeah, but he's, man, I have to be honest, man. I hadn't seen him in years. I went as a surprise. I went by the show because Damian Marley was doing the show, and all the dudes at the radio station set it up to be like a surprise where I was going to walk in. And I was a bit nervous because I was like, it's been a while since I've seen him, and I never know, man. Dude is the
same guy. Same.
Genuine, honest.
He's a good dude.
God, man, it's so, dude, we need more people like this in the industry, man, like with success.
He's somebody that I'll drive home from work sometimes, and I'll call him, and I'll be like, man, I appreciate the good look that you gave me. Because he's given me a couple good looks that helped me, like, really get something going. Like, it wouldn't, some of the things wouldn't have happened. And not his word, but just something he kind of put behind me in order to get something going. So, like, man, I'll always, like, yeah, Big Boy is a good dude. But on to the next. Not only have I hung out with B Plus on the United States soil, but back when I was young and hot and I was getting away to Brazil every now and again, I happened to step up into this club and see it was B Plus and Mad Lib, and then you guys had there was a drummer. Because I think it was something where you brought drummers from Leimert Park, and then you got them together with it was drummers from Leimert, it was drummers from LA with
Brazilian drummers, and then DJs from here and producers and
you tell us about that.
So basically, like in the kind of mid 90s, I was kind of tapping out as far as like, I just felt like that the whole kind of publicity machine, just the way MTV was going, like the videos were starting to look like shopping lists, and the magazines were, I was just, it was just like a publicity machine that was feeding itself, you know what I mean? And there was no, I was just disappointed with the kind of depth. And so I had this idea. I mean, I'm that when I see a need, I'm more the type of person to try to do something about it rather than complain about it. So I was like, there's all these musicians, man, that we've built the culture around. And somebody told me that Earl Palmer, who has played, like, for me, the best records are the David Axelrod records, which were like the kind of hot records out here at the time that people were sampling. I mean, most notably is the Snoop, down,
Yeah.
Axelrod. So, and you know, the drummer on that record is Earl Palmer, and Earl Palmer was playing in Burbank every Tuesday night. He had a little night, and he was like almost 80, and he was, you know, and he had played with everybody, and I was just like, you know, we got to find a way somehow if we're listening to their music. So when I reached out to him anyway, you know, it turned out that all the, you know, because you don't have to clear drums, none of these dudes had any idea that Biz or Snoop or the Pharcyde, whoever were rapping over their drums. So I thought, well, let's try to get some of them together. We'll get the DJs in the same room and we'll just play the music for them. And I'll take photos. And they're all pretty sharp, dude, you know, like old school session musician dudes, dressed sharp, real big personalities and everything. So we put the group of drummers together with the DJs, with J-Rock, Babu, and Cut. And it was like 3 days before we were supposed to shoot, the guy from the magazine said, you know, like, why don't we film it? And I'd done a couple of music videos, but I hadn't done a short film since school. All right, let's film it. And then it ended up being this really cool little short called Keeping Time, where you just see their faces, like they get like musician face, you know, like, you know what I mean? Like they were like tripping, like, what the hell? And I said, where do they play this kind of music? I was like, man, at the club. They had never seen nobody rock doubles, for example. They didn't even know what rocking doubles was. And to see them watch like Babs rock doubles of their drumming was like
amazing.
Funny. And so after the film came out, it got into Sundance. It started to get some traction. It was a big deal. This was now fast forwarded to 2000. And I showed, there was this thing starting called the Red Bull Music Academy. And the first one was in Dublin. I think the second one was in London. I had some friends involved and they said, you know, they'll pay for you to come out to show your film. So I went, showed my film. And after I showed the film, the guys sat me down at this meeting or whatever. And they said, look, the next one we're doing is in Sao Paulo. And we want to do that. What you have in your film, we want to do that in Sao Paulo. And I was like, dope. But you know me, man, I was always like angling, like, yeah, that's cool. But like, why don't we do it with Brazilian drummers too? And they were like, oh, even better. But I had never done anything like that before. I'd never done a kind of big corporate, you know, branded event or branded content or whatever you want to call it now. And so, yeah, so we went to Brazil. They paid for me to go down there to spend a couple of weeks and do some research, find some drummers there. And then, like, it was so, dude, we 6,000 miles from home in a club, having this kind of exalted, crazy experience. And whatever way I turn around, I see you come up out of the crowd onto the stage. I'm like, yo, what the hell?
Mooch is international on him. He don't got to be with the Pharcyde to be international. You know what I'm saying? I'll pop up on the scene.
I was bugging out, like, wow. I was so happy that, because it was like a dream for us. Like, in some respects, it was like, damn, we came this far away and we managed to do something. I mean, it wasn't just the event itself. I mean, the point was that, like, you know, crazy stuff happened, like where, like, I remember Madlib went there, and I remember we went to pick him up at the airport, and we were like, yo, you're supposed to DJ, like, this is Thursday, you're supposed to DJ Sunday, where's your records? He was like, yo, I'm gonna buy some records, man, fuck this shit. Like, you buy records? You ain't never even been here before. But they got records. I mean, in those days.
I know.
And so, man, to see that Sunday night in this absolutely packed club, Otis play a set of Brazilian music that he's just bought like the previous 3 days on the street in Brazil, and to see Brazilians' faces melting, you know what I mean? Like, they never sing. You know, the notion that some American guy that they really looked up to, that was like, it was weird, man. Like, that's the other thing. Like the record with Wild Child was a big hit there. I don't know why, but it was like a hit. And so to them, he was, oh, it's Wild Child's producer.
Yeah.
You know, to us, it was like, yeah, he's Quasimodo, he's all this other stuff. But to see him melt Brazilian faces, playing Brazilian music back to Brazilians, with like, just to take those kinds of chances. And just the conversations we had and the people we met and everything. It was an amazing experience. And then bang, you show up in the middle of it, like, what?
You know what? You gave me a couple pieces that have been gaps in my curiosity since 2000. One, I went to a party the night before that, and I was hanging out with all these guys, and it was a bunch of DJs at a bar. And I used to have, when I would go down there, I had this guy who used to take me around, and he spoke English, and he was kind of privileged. He spoke English and he spoke Portuguese, and he would pick me up from the airport. He'd move me around or whatever. And I was at this party, and matter of fact, I'm gonna send you the picture tomorrow. I'm gonna find it. But okay. I'm there with like 4 DJs from around the world at this bar, and we're drinking. And I've sent the picture out to people, and I said, man, I don't know where these guys are from, but do you know the names of any of these DJs that are in this picture? Now, it's so funny because one of the questions I was going to ask you was, when did you see corporate America come into kind of like hip hop a little bit, but not on the major level, but kind of where they dealt with like kind of like the underground a little bit? And you answered my question, because when you said it, it clicked. Red Bull was really some of the first corporate dollars to, okay, you had Sprite and all that were dealing with like Busta Rhymes and like on that high level, but on
St.
like,
St. Ides.
St. Ides, Ice Cube, DJ Pooh.
DJ Pooh, man. I love DJ Pooh, man.
DJ Pooh.
I love DJ Pooh, man.
Commercial director. And then two, my father had always talked about this jazz musician from Leimert Park named Durf, and I met Durf. I met Durf out there. I met Durf on the stage.
Durf was the first one. Okay, so like Otis Madlib wasn't part of the first group. The first group was DJs. So Madlib was kind of an experiment that we did this thing. We launched the film at this thing in downtown, and like it was at Sound Lessons. I don't know if you ever went to Sound Lessons.
Yeah.
Okay, so but Sound Lessons, but like you know, you could hold probably 250 people, 300 people in there, but like 1,000 people showed up, man. And it was the first time I was ever at an event where like I really felt the wrath of people that I love seeing me and knowing that I can get them in, and there's nothing I can do. Like, it's so beyond capacity. Yeah, horrible. I mean, you know what I mean? I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Man.
I can't do any. I can't get them. Oh, man. I need to get back inside and just hide right now.
It's a horrible feeling.
Worse. You'll be. But we had all these people showed up. I think it was because KCRW, like Garth or somebody was promoted or something. It was a big success. And then we started to get booked. Like the Getty booked us to do it at the Getty. That was a huge thing as well. And then we did this thing on the West Side. We wanted to try something different. So we just did it with Durf and with Otis. And they clicked. And then I had a kind of realization about Otis, which is that like he in the spirit of it, he's not afraid of noise or for the shit to go train wrecky or whatever. He embraced that, you know what I mean? So to me, it was like, oh, we got to put him down. So yeah, so so both Durf and him came to Brazil, and Durf really is, oh man, he's a special guy, man. I mean,
I was kind of proud.
You got to get him on this, man. Because Durf's stories will melt your brain, man.
I was flossing on my dad. Yeah, I was down in Brazil, you know what I'm saying, hanging out. I'm falling on my toes, and I ran into your boy Durf on stage. You know what I'm saying? He was doing his thing with some cats, but
you know that thing he would.
Yeah, I say all that to segue into Dilla.
Okay.
Now, for me, I was only acquainted with Dilla for a brief time and space, but I knew JD. Like, that's what I knew. You know what I'm saying? So during the making of Lab Cabin, I knew JD. I knew a cat who was he was shy. He was to himself. Oh, man.
I have the photo. I went there the day that Diamond D, I think, did 2 songs on Lab Cabin. And I went to the studio, like somebody from Trudy or somebody from Truly from Delicious called me and said, you know, Diamond's going to be there today. Can you go over there and make a photo of the guys with Diamond? And I remember going there, and I remember seeing there's another dude there that day, but he didn't want to be in the pictures.
Yeah, man.
That was the first time I ever met him. But I didn't say nothing to him. I mean, you know, he was so shy, and so he was probably so young. He was probably young, 18 years old.
Yeah, that was JD. I was acquainted with Dilla a couple times as an adult, but like JD was the cat that I knew. And it would amaze me. I always tell this story, like he would sample the Rhodes on his MP and then he would like play it, and it was just so amazing for me to watch that. Like literally I would just sit there and like be amazed. As a matter of fact, I remember, you know, JD didn't have a name at all when he was doing Lab Cabin. Like people in hip hop kind of had a buzz about who he was and who.
Yeah, but there was people out here that were kind of catching some feelings that one of our stars of the beat making world was somehow wasn't in the hot seat for the second Pharcyde record. What happened with that? And then there's it's supposed to be Tribe Called Quest producing the record, and then who's this guy? Who's this young dude? He ain't Tribe Called Quest.
Delicious Vinyl was anti JD. Brown argued, and he fought for that.
So explain the story then. How did you guys end up?
They went to New York. They went to go and meet with Q-Tip, Mos Def, Buck Wild, like all these cats. And they had met with Q-Tip, and man, they were feeling Dilla, man. They were feeling JD. They were feeling JD. And then they go back and they talk to Delicious, and they're like, who is this guy? Like, he doesn't have he doesn't, like, what has he done, whatever. And then Brown had this thing of, like, when he was really passionate about something, he'd throw these tantrums. Like, he'd be like, yo, you guys don't understand. This is, you don't understand. The artist in the record label being like, yo, you gotta feel me on this, man. This is my, like, man, you guys get a lot of stuff your way. Dude, we gotta do this. And dude, he just came through, man, and it was amazing. But the funny thing about it, like him doing that record, I didn't understand the levity of it until years late. You know what I'm saying? And then you get Dilla, and then you get Dilla dealing with the Erykah Badu's and dealing with the Commons and dealing with all these guys, and then you're just like, whoa.
He changed the music. He changed the music. He changed the music. I mean, there's no other way to understand it. He changed the music.
And how did you click with him? Or how did that relationship?
Okay, so I would have met him that time. But I have to say, like, you know, I remember this period very well. I remember arguing with people over this. There was definitely people that were sour. And then, you know, in them days, like, man, his snares is too fucking loud.
Man.
His snares is too fucking snares. He's fucking up Tribe Called Quest too, and I don't know. Man.
I heard that whispered. But the crazy thing about it though, it's like producers were just starting to get paid in LA. You know what I'm saying? And they were just starting to really understand the feeling of what it feels like to go up to a label and get a check, or have your attorney get a check on the producer, hip hop, like whatever. So I personally feel like it was kind of a thing where a lot of producers felt like, because they had relationships with groups, that regardless of coming through with the beat tapes and just doing whatever, it was kind of like, yo, man, I'm from LA, they're from LA. You know what I'm saying?
Getting some dude out of Detroit.
You know what I'm saying? This dude, but dude, I could say this. I'll tell you how fire it was. Even though I didn't understand the levity of Dilla, I would wear his tapes out, dude. Because we would all like, so the manager Suave or Imani or Brown or Lipper Trey, they would get the tapes to choose the beats or whatever. And like, he's the first producer that I think would really, he would put like, dude, on one side of the tape, it could be like maybe 20 little segments, maybe about maybe 6 or 8 bars or whatever. It's just enough for you to feel it. And then if you kind of vibe with it, then he come into the studio and then you guys you build on it. But dude, I rode the streets of LA. Like, man, Dilla beat tapes was my soundtrack, man. Like I can say that. But for all these Dillaites out there, but anyway, I've had my Dilla moment, man. I'll let that go.
I mean, so I first met him then, and then around 2000 maybe or 99, when Slum was on A&M for a minute, he was there, and by that point, Fat Beats had was open. It was on Vermont, and I remember I was supposed to go shoot him, and I went and got J-Rock. I said, because the Beat Junkies had a mix. They had done that raucous thing, but they had this mix where they had that song, "Why the Fuck Am I Fucking With You" or whatever it is. That Slum. Like a bootleg from Japan, and on one side it was 3 songs, and that's for me that was like that's how we found out about Slum, really. And so we go over there, brought J-Rock with me. Everybody's awkward. It's awkward as fuck. We do these photos. It's cool. Of course, it ends up. It's only 6 years later. The photo I made that afternoon of him ends up being the funeral photo.
Oh wow!
And then I didn't see him again. And then I remember being in a conversation with Peanut Butter Wolf and Madlib, and they were saying that he's agreed to do, like, Otis had flipped this beat that Dilla that someone had gotten a Dilla CD and rapped on it, and Dilla liked it, and then they had agreed to do a record, and then they asked me would I do the photos. And so that was actually the first time I ever went to Detroit. That was like 2003, I think. And we spent some time with him. That was the first time we ever really actually hung out with him. And I remember he was kind of like in shock because we knew all the kind of, because of Fat Beats and just because of the homies, and he was just one of those names that you would always look for, in those 12s, like who produced it. I mean, if his name was there, you'd always give it an extra listen, And we were like, yo, there's mad people in LA that feel you. You should come to LA. And then he ended up coming to LA. I mean, he died in LA. But the Brazil link is that, in 2005, one of the films that we had made about the drummers got invited to be in this film festival, this hip hop film festival in Brazil. And the guy who ran the festival was a friend, and he said, I have this dream. I want Madlib to play the closing night of the film festival. We're gonna have an event. So, and I want you guys, can you guys help me hook it up? So I was finishing Brazil in Time, which was the Brazilian film. And we had this like, dude, let's convince Madlib to fucking bring Dilla, dude. Cause they were working at the time. And so we went and had lunch with Otis, and then he picked up the phone on the way home, called Dilla, and he was like, yo, I just got invited to do the show in Brazil. You want to come fucking play with me? And he was like, fuck yeah. And then next thing, he ended up coming to Brazil with us. It was a kind of a sad story, actually. It's the last time I saw him alive. But I spoke to him on the phone after that, but he should never have gone to Brazil, basically. But
yeah, it's a trip because I saw him like maybe a month before he went to Brazil, and his mom had moved out here with him.
Yep.
Or she was out here. I don't know if she was moved out, but Dwelle was performing over at Jennifer Lopez's club upstairs.
The Conga
Room. Yeah, Conga Room. So Dwelle was performing. Yep. And then Dilla was supposed to spin after the show. So Dilla spun, and years prior, I tell the story. It ain't speaking ill. I tell the story. I had a girl with me, and I went to the House of Blues, and we saw Slum, and I went to go and introduce her to Slum because I was like, oh man, Dilla's the homeboy. So I take her over there. And Dilla was talking to some girls, and he really was like kind of sunning me, like kind of like a fan, kind of like a fan or whatever. And dude, I was like, this is Smooch. I'm like, dang. Put it this way, the girl said, do you really know him? You know what I'm saying? On everything. She said, do you really know him? So I was like, okay. So I hadn't talked to him from that moment, but I was kind of like, that's weird. But the night of the Dwelle show, when he was there with his mom, we both had valet parked our cars. And so he was waiting to get his car, and I was going to give the guy the keys to get my car. And he turned around, and he looked at me, and he said, Smooch. Smooch. He said, yo, man, this is my mom's dude. And he introduced his mom to me. And he's like, man, I know. We didn't even get into a conversation. He's like, dude, I know. He's like, here's my number. Call me. We're going to hook up, whatever. And I hit him. And he was like, dude, I'm going to get with you after I get back from Brazil or whatever. And it just never, it just never did. But it was cool. I was telling Jeremy that story earlier today, but it was cool. There was like that sense of closure there where it wasn't like, oh.
Left off. Yeah.
Oh, but we didn't even have to discuss it because he knew. He knew. But he was a guy who was very talented, man, and he loved music, dude. It was good to watch Dilla, to see what JD grew into as Dilla, but JD was a cat that just loved the studio, man. When you talk about studio rats, you know what I'm saying? Cats that just love to be in the studio, love to make music, love to just go. That was like that was a moment in time for me that I can look back to where I can say, man, I could try to explain to people kind of how it was in that time and space, but words would never. Nah. It wouldn't. It doesn't. Even me talking about it now, like it doesn't resonate. So me saying that, I want to ask you, what would you say your 3 most memorable moments in hip hop were?
That's a hard one, man. I mean,
that's not hard. Not reggae. We're not talking reggae. We're not talking.
Okay, number 1, 1990. Someone can check me on the internet, but I think 1992. I want to say perhaps early �93, when Tribe came to LA to do Scenario on the Arsenio Hall show. I had a photo shoot with the Freestyle Fellowship that afternoon. And they were tight with the dudes from Leaders. And so the dudes from Leaders were looking to get some herb. So they called Freestyle Fellowship. They were staying at the Mondrian. We went over there, and there was a freestyle session in the room with Tribe, Leaders, and Fellowship. And then I don't know how the hell he figured it out or what frequency he was tuned into, but they got about an hour in, and Snoop showed up. So it was like a free. Me and Kilu with a boombox, basically playing instrumentals, and it was Fellowship, Leaders, Tribe. Tip wasn't there. Tip came in for a minute, but it was mainly Fife and Snoop showed up, and so and they wouldn't let me take photos. That was the other thing.
They wouldn't let you take photos.
No photos, man. All right, so so that's one. I mean, that's pretty epic. I would say that night in Brazil, you know what I'm saying? That night in Brazil was just on some life shit. That was the first time my pops I flew my pops down there just because I thought like I might never get back to this place and he should see it. So I bought him a ticket and he came down, flew from Ireland or whatever. When I came back to the hotel that night after that gig, when I opened up my hotel room door, there was a note, and it was my pops just saying, "I'm so proud of you." And it was the first time he ever said that shit. I was crying and shit. It was. He said he was proud of me, which was deep for me. But then the funny thing was, the following day he called me from the bus station. He was going to take the bus to Rio, and he was like, "Man, you ever have a situation where like you're sitting in a car, but the music in your car is in the same beat as the the knocking of the car next to you and the guy singing on the bicycle and everything is lining up. You ever have that happen to you? That's just after happening to me. And I was like, all right, somehow he figured it out. Like he got it. Actually, yay, man, the world is actually in time. It's okay, you know. That was pretty epic. That was pretty cool. And then number 3, I gotta go somewhere much more recent. I have to be honest, man. Over the past sort of like 5 to 7 years, a lot of the elders of my game, you know, the Henry Chalfonts, the Jeanette Beckmans, the Jamel Shabazes, the Joe Conzos, like all the old school, the cats that photographed the really original New York dudes that were photographing in the 70s, have kind of adopted the sort of 80s and 90s ones, and we're all friends. And that's, I mean, for me, that's like knowing that there's a community of people that are the hip hop photographers, basically, you know, from that era. It's not that many of us. And that we all kind of know each other and that we all look out for each other. I mean, that's another, but I could go on, man. I mean, I seen, you know, like Horace Tapscott, Don Cherry, the Watts Prophets, you know, I mean, man, you know, I've been very lucky. Been very, very lucky, you know.
Hey, man, I was able to get to know on a platonic level, though, just homeboy, homegirl type thing. But Don Cherry's daughter, man, we out on Gorillas, man. We hung out with Nina Cherry.
Yeah.
We were out with Nina Cherry for a long time, and it was crazy because, like, I was talking to her, and I was like, man, I thought you were so dope when I was young. You know, when she had, you know, was dealing with Malcolm McLaren and that whole Buffalo Gal thing and all that kind of stuff. And it was amazing. And it's a trip because it's like you can meet the largest artist and they're so cool. Yeah. And then you can meet an artist that's not like even nowhere near the level. And it's just kind of like, man.
Thirst. Yeah, it's rough. I know. No, I mean, there's nothing. I mean, you know, I've had a chance to hang out in Erykah Badu's house. You know what I'm saying? I'll tell you a crazy story that I don't know if you were there. Were you there? Were you with the Pharcyde? I mean, Big Boy was there for sure. And I know Mark Love was there for sure, but I don't know if you would have been touring with him yet. But I went to photograph Scarface for Rap Pages. It was the second cover I'd shot for Rap Pages. Wow. And I went to shoot him in Houston. And he had just bought a new house, and you know, just to show you how cottage industry it was in those days, he invited us to stay at his house. So I was like, okay. But then of course we got there and like he had just moved in, so there was no furniture, dude. There was a pool table, there was a bed in his room, and then there was some, you know, dining stuff and kitchen stuff. But there was, you know, there was all these empty rooms. So I ended up sleeping on the floor under a curtain. Too crazy. But like, anyways, that weekend Pharcyde played in Houston, and they had a party at Scarface's, and Pharcyde came.
Yeah, no, I wasn't going out, but I knew that they had a relationship with Willie D and Scarface.
And I mean, you know, just all the people that were there and the things that were going on, and I mean, it was
heard a lot of dice shooting. Heard there was some shake 'em up.
Yep. You know what I mean? You know, the kind of things that you know that seem kind of incredulous to people now are like, yeah, pretty ordinary things. I mean, like I say, like, you know, I went and hung out in Erykah Badu's house and took her photo. That's my friend. If I send her a text, she'll hit me back. You know what I mean? Whatever. That stuff is, you know, I mean, that's pretty, you know, I'm privileged. I'm a very privileged person for this. And I'm much more, I've had a very rich life thanks to the generosity of the hip hop community. I have to be honest. You know, in this moment, I think it's important to say shit like that. You know what I mean? It's not too many folks that can, you know, speak to 30 years of it the way I can. You know what I'm saying? But I tried to, you know, I mean, the way I was trained, I try as best as I can. And you know, all those early Pharcyde photos, the saying, you know, if somebody had a project and they were doing good, it wasn't about money. I would just go and make the photos because it would help. You know, whatever project they were doing or volume 10 or whoever it was, I would just go and make photos and try to stay above the fray too. Cause it was always like the little competitive tensions. Well, he's cool, but he can't freestyle. You know,
I tell you what, if we would have known then what we know now,
oh man,
we could have worked the labels, we could have worked the attorneys, we could have worked everybody, man. Everybody could have been paid. we were just young, man.
Yeah, and there was no, you know, people were kind of making up the business. It wasn't like the business was all set in stone. You know, this was all invented out of people's heads. You know, I mean, whether you're talking about street promotion, whether you're talking about the way those deals were structured, as crooked as they were. I mean, whatever it was all stuff that was, you know, people were coming in with no, you know, no prior experience. Like I didn't
no guidebook, no nothing. It was
guidebook, no. I mean, a few elders that looked out, but like in my case, all for the most part musicians. You know, like Horace Tapscott, Billy Higgins, Kamau Daoud, Ben Caldwell.
Wow.
You know what I mean? People like that would reach out and be like, "Hey, this is what you should be." You know, B Hall. You know what I mean? People like that would reach out, put a hand on your shoulder, and be like, "Okay, watch out for this," kind of thing. You know, but it was all like that. It wasn't like there was a, you know, I mean, it's in the academy now. There's scholars that just teach hip hop, you know.
Yeah, I love the title of your book. It's not about salary. I think that's like one of the best titles I've heard for a book. It sums up a whole emotion.
I also, I mean, I don't know if this is the subtlety of it or whatever, but I also love the idea that it was a quote from KRS, but then it was flipped by NWA on Gangsta Gangsta. So, and I like the notion that like KRS, it's not about a salary, it's all about reality, and the NWA, when it's not about a salary, Gangsta Gangsta. And I was like, somehow I want to have this book that lives between those two endings, basically.
Yeah.
So, but my daughter was watching Trolls the other night. There's a line in there. I was like, I was really tripping out. There's a line in one of the songs, and it says, "It's not about a salary, it's all about celery." And it was so man, what the hell happened? There's like a song about salad or some shit.
A writer was the hip hop head. He was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna get that in there."
KRS in there.
Yeah, what is Trolls? How's that relate to Trolls? That's funny.
Song and Trolls is crazy. That's the lyric. I mean,
that's hilarious.
Salary. I was like, because when I was watching it with my daughter, and I was like, "Whoa, that sounds familiar." And it's all about celery. I was just like, "Whoa, that's crazy." Yeah.
So tell me this, B+, where do you see social interaction? Because, you know, man, I like, honestly, like, I didn't go out a lot, let's say a year ago or 2 years ago, and then just seeing you is a trip, because I'm thinking, what was that little Martini Lounge on Melrose? I'm thinking like all these social places. We were so social back in the 90s, just hip hop, just seeing DJs playing, all that kind of stuff. Where do you see things headed from what you've seen in life as far as this Corona business is concerned, and socializing and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I mean, it seems like, you know, on one level, if we're to kind of go down the rabbit hole of it, it seems like that this is what, you know, the scaling down of social interaction is what's been going on really since the end of the Second World War. You know what I mean? Like if you read about places like Central Avenue and the notions of like Black public space has been, you know, we've seen this country, you know, erode. Yeah. You know, I mean, the notion of like autonomous Black public space is under threat, you know, in the same way as Black folks' lives are under threat. You know, Black public spaces have been under a threat for a long time, and the way that we're being put, you know, first it's through TV, and then it's, you know, and it's this notion that like, you know, it's to devalue our firsthand experiences and for us to have almost entirely mediated experiences. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, so that's, I mean, so on one hand, it's like, it seems very clear that this is the way that we've reacted to this. It seems like it's very much part of that same framework. The only thing is that, you know, the only upside of this really is that we've seen also, I think by pushing people into this interior kind of, giving everybody enough time to go fucking sit down and have a fucking real think about what the hell you're doing and with your life, in terms of what you eat, what you take in terms of what you watch, what the kind of rat race mentality that it's been so easy for us to be in for the past who fucking knows how long, most of my life, certainly,
all my life.
I mean, I yes and no though, but because like when you think back to those times, you know what I'm saying? Like in the early 90s where we're talking about like, this notion you have to call a number to find out what the fuck is going on. There was those times where you say to somebody like, all right, so you gonna be there? All right, I'll see you there. No time. You know what I mean? You could show up anytime between 11 and fucking 1:55, walk in the door like, I knew you were gonna make it. Fuck, man, where are you? That didn't like we weren't, you know what I mean? It was a different level. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like that's what I'm talking about. And so
where are you?
in that sort of 20-30 year period, we've seen like our world has like the 24-hour work day. You know what I'm saying? I wake up, the first thing I do is this. It's like, you know what I mean? Like this is new, that was new. So on one level there's that, but on the other level, we've now precipitated a situation where it's like, you know what, if everybody stops working, the world isn't going to stop. And so I see a lot of people reevaluating their lives. I see a lot. I think priorities are changing. I think we're going to see a situation where this, super densely populated, super kind of hyperactive urban experience is becoming less attractive to people. Like people starting to think more seriously about living in the land, going out and being able to sort of like live off the grid potentially, if that's what needs to be. And obviously the notion of people showing up in a different way than I've ever done before. If you really plug it all out, and then something like George Floyd happens, if people ain't got nothing else to do, they will show up, and they have been showing up. And this is really important, actually. I mean, this is, and people showed up, and it didn't spread the fucking virus, and fucking shit has started to change. And this is all very hopeful, actually. I mean, as dark as it is, and as dark as it can seem, and when you look at what's going on in Portland and potentially what's going on in Oakland, you know what I mean? This is a kind of an important moment to pay attention, but there is a lot of people that are fucking sick to their guts of this, and they're not all African American, and they're not all brown. There's a lot of white people that are finally fucking stepping up. There's a generational shift, obviously, and it's come in different ways. You know what I mean? Like it's come. People have become politicized through different kinds of things, whether it's their interest in the environment or trans issues or homophobic issues. Wherever people are coming from, people showed up, and that's new. Like I'm sure you guys did a shit ton. I mean, it's not about a salary. In the back of it's not about a salary was an appendix about police brutality in LA, because it was so difficult to explain to people, man, just how fucking intense. You know what I'm saying? Like
after
couldn't imagine it.
After Rodney King, I can honestly say it got kind of cooler. Like really, it got kind of cooler, because before Rodney King, okay, like right now, as however old I am, an old man, I'll feel a tension when I see a police officer, even when I'm just straight edge, like nothing, no drink, nothing, straight edge.
By virtue of the way this place works, you are guilty already. And that's fucking crazy.
And so there's a feeling that I get, but from like in the 90s to like 94, 90, like right around like from 90, 94, 88, 94, I remember, and I was just like, dude, I was like, so we'll just say like 88, I was probably like 17 years old or so. So we just say from 17 years old up until like 94, I can remember feeling an anxiety come over me whenever I saw a police officer that was like really like a fear, like literally, like even with not doing anything but abiding by the law and everything, but just saying, man, I know that if I get messed with, it could just be horrible. Not a fear of death. It wasn't so much a fear of death, but it was just knowing that you can be harassed. You can be held for about 45 minutes and just put through the most mundane situation, basically because somebody with authority is bored and they're just going to screw with you and they're going to take stuff out of your car and they're just going to do things to just whatever. But kind of like after Rodney King, after all the Rampart stuff, all that kind of stuff, it eased up a bit, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know necessarily that. I think it was temporary. I mean, I think, you know, the key issue and the sort of important aspect of what's been happening over the past few months is that they, you know, all these years of organizing amongst those folks that you know, at the leadership level of Black Lives Matter, is to understand precisely that you know, the plug for this thing is taxpayers' dollars. And so the more they ramp up fear, the more that people desire strong policing, whatever that means. But basically what that means is policing without any oversight. And that the only way really to do stuff about this is to defund it, like take the money away from them and start to put money into, you know, a police officer doesn't need to show up to everything. I don't know. I remember, it's like maybe 2000, 2001, I remember demonstrating at Nickerson, and it was a guy, his name, it's one of those things, dude, where a guy has a name that you're just like, how could you end up with this name? But the dude's name was literally, his name was Chubby Hood. It was just like, anyways, but he was out there, he had mental health issues, and he had a butter knife, and he was only threatening to do damage to himself. And the police came along and they basically, you know, they executed him. Basically, they shot him right there. And as people were screaming, no, leave him alone. And to be able to somehow find a way somehow to make that just complete. I mean, it's completely and utterly unacceptable. As Ava, speaking of Ava, you know, if you've had a chance to see the film 13th, you know, this is linked to a very dark legacy in this country. It's impossible to imagine this country without thinking about the legacy of slavery. I'm sorry, it's impossible to think about the history of Hollywood without the history of slavery. And it's impossible to think about contemporary policing without thinking about the history of slavery. And you know, she helped point that out. You know, but as a generation, as a sort of post-civil rights generation, hip hop has helped to point. Hip hop actually, one of the main, you know, I don't see BLM as being any different than hip hop, actually. You know what I mean? Without hip hop, I don't know. And I mean, I know, you know, Patrice Colors is a big hip hop head, but, you know, without people like Chuck and without people like NWA having the courage actually to stand up and say that some of the stuff that was said, Dead Pred, you know, I mean, we can run down the, you know, who didn't do a song about how fucking whack the police is, you know what I mean? In reality of it, you know what I mean? But without all that, the ground wouldn't have been, you know, there is a continuity there basically between, you know, the old folks here amongst us, myself included. You know, I mean, I was kind of angry the first few days here because I was like, fuck, I want to be out there, man. But then I have a kid and I don't want to have to quarantine for my kid, and I was nervous about the freaking virus and whatever. But you know, so I was doing my social medias, but I was angry because I wanted to be there. I'm part of this, you know. And I mean, so that's the, you know, to get back to the original question. I mean, I think there's a lot more people thinking seriously about what stake we have in this and what kind of lives we want to lead, and that can only come to good things, I think. And so I'm grateful on one level for, you know, for the fact that we all had a chance to sit down and think for a second. As to how we're going to get out of this thing, that's a whole other, you know, I don't want to say it's out of my pay grade, but I think
all our pay grades.
Yeah, I think we're going into a different way of interacting for at least for a while. It's hard to imagine going back to what normal was. But I also know that there's a lot of very rich, very invested interests in, you know, the notion of there being no entertainment industry, basically, as far as no live gigs. I mean, that just, I don't know that they're gonna let that happen. I think we're gonna find a way to, but it's gonna take a lot longer, I think, than people realize.
Well, no, man, I want to thank you, B Plus, man. This is the longest episode of Splendid we've had, man. This was a great conversation.
Like the Irish people, dude, you get the extended sentences, and the next minute the show is like getting longer and longer.
Nah, I appreciate it. And then once again, anything you want to shout out, B Plus?
You know, if you want to see more of the work, there's a couple of places you can go. Mochilla.com is the website of the production company that I run with Eric Coleman. That's MOCILLA.com. I have a book of photos that just came out like a year and a half ago called Ghost Notes, which you can find on Amazon or Biblio or any of the online stuff. And other than that, man, just to say thank you for having me, man. I always looking forward to chopping it up with you. You know what I mean?
Great conversation. You, Jeremy, anything you want to shout out? Anything you got going?
Yeah. First of all, I just like to say it's an honor to even be amongst you guys and hear these legendary stories. You know, I was a kid, I was a fan, and the fact that you guys were there. I always I never thought I would be so closely involved with people who were actually in the mix. So that's dope. But yeah, I was actually featured at Voyage LA as a article or magazine, something like that. When I used to do stand-up comedy. So that should be coming pretty soon. Other than that, everything else, JeremyScipio.com, Instagram, was it Jeremy Comedy?
Jeremy Comedy. I get it wrong every time, but I got it right this time. Jeremy Comedy.
So yeah, on Insta it's B Pleasel for me. So that's what Madlib used to call me. So that was the thing that was left by the time I got there.
All good.
So
well, nah, that was Splendid Radio on Pharcyde TV. I'll catch back up with you guys. Thanks.
All right.
Peace.